Xavi is one of the most dynamic and box-office young talents in football today, and his inclusion will surely take Thomas Frank's Tottenham side to another level. Tottenham have already started the season brilliantly, taking Champions League winners PSG to penalties and keeping 2 clean sheets out of 2 games in the Premier League, including a dominant performance against Manchester City. Their style of play has completely changed from last season, where they put up dreadful performances week after week, resulting in them coming 17th in the table, their worst ever finish in club history. However, they did win the Europa League, which made them unsure whether or not to sack Ange Postecoglou. The club ultimately decided to sack him, and most Spurs fans were outraged. Following this, Tottenham appointed Thomas Frank as their new head coach, which now looks like the best decision they could have ever made. Frank has had instant success managing Spurs, and a big reason for this is because of his elite man management, tactical adaptability, and his defensive setup. Under Postecoglou, Tottenham pressed half-heartedly and would always leave big gaps and open space in their midfield while doing so. This made it very easy for the opposition to get into these spaces behind the midfield and consistently score, which resulted in Tottenham losing over 20 games and having their worst defensive record in their history. But Frank has changed all that. In his first 3 games in charge, Tottenham looked like a completely different team. When they press, they are now a lot more narrow and compact. Frank has disciplined his players to focus on covering the open passing lanes in the midfield, which is where they were most vulnerable last season. They have a more intentional sort of pressing, where they press the opposition's backline in a controlled unit, instead of meaninglessly pressing high without checking if a teammate has covered the space left open by the player. Due to their improved structure and press off the ball, they also force teams to make more mistakes, which is the exact opposite of last season, when they were the ones giving the ball away. Moreover, one of Frank's greatest attributes is that he is not stubborn, and his defensive structure is not rigid at all, as he prefers to have tactical fluidity. Depending on who his opposition is, Frank will frequently change formations and schemes to put his team in the best position. For example, against a strong side like PSG, he ran a 5-in-the-back formation, so Tottenham could have more bodies in defense and stability when guarding PSG's dangerous attacking players. But against a team like Manchester City, Frank changed again to a back 4. He opted to put an extra body in midfield, which adds another player to press their backline, allows Tottenham to disrupt Man City's build-up in midfield, and doesn't let Man City put too much pressure on the Spurs' defense. It's only been 3 games, but it just seems like Tottenham have gone from an attack-first, defend-never style under Ange to a controlled and structured system that prioritizes high-energy pressing and defensive stability over everything else. However, they are not perfect. Even though they have scored 7 goals in their last 3 games, they lack creativity and flair in their attack. They have shown glimpses of offensive brilliance through players like Mohamed Kudus, but that's not nearly enough for them to contend for titles. This is not meant to be an insult, but most of their goals are the result of set pieces and hopeful crosses into the box. It is working right now, but that won't be enough long-term over 38 games and in the Champions League. James Maddison and Dejan Kulusevski are also out with long-term injuries, so Tottenham desperately needed to sign a player with elite technical ability and creativity. And they did. Tottenham signed Xavi Simons, a star that played in teams like PSG and Barcelona, was coveted by teams like Chelsea and Bayern Munich, but who has ultimately chosen to join the Lily Whites. This is a signing that no one could have expected, especially with Tottenham's reputation of not being able to sign big-name players. Xavi is a perfect signing for them, however, because, with all their injuries, Spurs needed a line-breaking attacking midfielder who can create chances for himself and for others. In the last 2 seasons for RB Leipzig, Xavi put up a phenomenal 20 goals and 20 assists in 55 starts. He created over 2.1 chances per game, while also completing over 2.7 dribbles per game. Regardless of stats and numbers, however, football fans who have watched Xavi can testify to how much of a joy he is to watch. His game is the epitome of flair and unpredictability, and he is just mesmerizing on the ball. Moreover, he has been in the spotlight since he was a young teenager, so the pressure of the Premier League won't get to him. Xavi is extremely composed for a 22-year-old, and he displayed this when he controlled the game against Real Madrid in the Champions League 2 seasons ago, or when he was one of the best performers at Euro 2024 for Holland, leading them to the semi-finals of the tournament. Xavi's star quality and talent is indisputable, but what about his fit in Thomas Frank's system? I believe he will suit the system perfectly for many reasons. Firstly, it is because of Frank's man management. He won't shackle any of his players and will allow them to display their unique abilities within that system, which is exactly what Xavi needs. He will be given the freedom to take on players with his elite acceleration and skill, while also being allowed to attempt certain risky passes and final balls that not many others would dare to try. Xavi even said himself in a recent interview that Frank was the main reason he decided to join Tottenham and stop waiting for Chelsea. Secondly, as I mentioned before, Frank changes his formation and tactics frequently, but this works in Xavi's favor. Xavi is so versatile that he can play in any setup that Frank chooses. He can play in his natural role as a 10, but he can also play out on the wing or even as a deeper midfielder picking the ball up from the defenders, initiating play. Thirdly, Tottenham will most likely be playing a lot of games on the back foot and attacking in transition. This style of play requires a midfielder who can drive the ball forward without losing it and playing the final ball to the attackers. Lastly, with players like Harry Kane and Heung-min Son leaving in recent years, Tottenham desperately needed a player that they can build around for the future. At 22 years old, Xavi is the perfect player for that role. He has the ability and demeanor to be a player of that caliber, and with Thomas Frank as his head coach, the sky is the limit for the North London side and Xavi himself. If you like this sort of football content, please like and subscribe.